Jane, can we have a little talk about our paper, please?
Yes, I so enjoyed working on it with you. You know I like talking, so research about talking is perfect. But remind me, Sue, what was it all about? Just in a nutshell.
Well, obviously it was about talking, and it was about talking in classrooms in school where programming was being taught. And we looked at we drew on some dialogue theory from other disciplines, particularly maths and science. And we interviewed some teachers with a qualitative research approach. And as a result, we developed a model that we think other researchers could use for programming education and classroom talk. There we go. That's it.
But Sue, I think I need a bit more detail. Tell me, why did we even start looking at this area to begin with? Why is classroom talk so important in programming education in schools?
Well, for one thing, it hasn't really been researched that much in computing. And most of the research in computing relates to pair programming and peer instruction. And research has shown that peer instruction positively impacts learning outcomes, and pair programming has been shown to improve program quality and confidence. So we know that talk is beneficial, but nobody's really studied this in much detail. And there's lots to look at. Talk takes place in a number of different forms in the classroom. Student dialogue, teacher and students' questions, use of programming-specific vocabulary, and the way that teachers and students explain their programs. So there's lots of scope here.
So we've got this bit of research that we've done in computing education, but you mentioned that there's kind of research in other disciplines. So what is there that we can use that's about talk?
Well, there is actually lots of empirical research in this area, primarily in maths and science classrooms, but going back decades. And in addition, there are some models, mostly drawing on sociocultural theory, that we drew on for this research. Firstly, Neil Mercer and his colleagues developed the idea of exploratory talk, in which partners, children in this case, engage critically but constructively with each other's ideas. Knowledge is more accountable and reasoning is more visible. Another approach is Neustrand et al.'s dialogically organized instruction. And they talk about a number of different discourse moves that teachers can use. For example, drawing in a student's point into subsequent conversation. Another model is dialogic teaching by Robin Alexander, who really draws on the work of Vygotsky and Bruner. And yet another one is accountable talk. And accountability is about students using weighting and turn taking and having respectful and grounded conversation. And then recently, Qui and Teo looked across these different models and drew a kind of a meta model, a meta framework that draws these together. And they have these different elements, as you can see in the diagram. The dialogue environment, where the dialogue takes place, the goal of the teaching, and the moves, the different ways that teachers and students construct dialogue, and how these contribute to classroom talk. And we're going to come back to these models later on.
Because I remember, and I did get really excited about these models because I'd not come across them, even though I was a teacher for years. But remind me, how did we design the research to capture computing teachers' experience of teaching programming and talk?
Well, we chose to use qualitative research for this study because we needed the richness and detail to answer our research question around what classroom talk takes place in programming classrooms. To ensure an interpretive approach to data collection and analysis, we used a methodology that I can sometimes not pronounce called hermeneutic phenomenological methodology. Phenomenological research seeks to reveal and describe lived experiences and to achieve a deeper understanding of the meaning of experience, generating an in-depth and comprehensive description of a phenomenon. And we talked to 20 teachers 3 from primary schools and 17 from secondary schools. All the teachers had experience of discussion and in programming classrooms because they were using the PRIMM lesson structure. And in case you're not familiar with PRIMM, PRIMM encourages dialogue about a program and explaining of programming. We conducted 30 to 45-minute interviews with teachers about their use of language in the programming classroom. We analysed the data using thematic analysis, iteratively, and taking into consideration our perspectives as researchers, according to the phenomenological approach. And it was fascinating to hear from the teachers about their use of classroom talk, and for some of them, they were reflecting on this for the very first time. So, maybe you can tell us, Jane, what themes emerged from this data?
It was fascinating listening to the teachers talking about talk, and the key themes that came out were, first of all, just how programming talk occurs generally in the classroom. The second one focused on questions and how questions are used in the classroom. The third one was all about explanations and how the code is important in terms of explaining things and how teachers encourage this. And then the fourth one was all about vocabulary, programming vocabulary, and what matters and how it's encouraged. And from those themes, we could see that encouragement around language was so important to the teacher's experience. It was all about the talk. And the first theme around classroom talk, it really highlighted the role of the shared program as a contributor to that. And in terms of questions, the big thing that came out about that was about the depth an advanced level of understanding that was provided by questions. And the fourth area was incredibly interesting to listen to the teachers talk about it. It was about the precision of terminology and why that was important to teachers. But across all of the four themes was this importance and contribution of the shared programme. And we identified lots of sub-themes, and people can read about that in the paper along with lots and lots of examples. So taking all of those findings together, I recall that that's when we went back to the models and we got our an emerge new model that came out of using the data. Can you remind me about that?
Yes, we did indeed. So we developed a model which incorporates Qui and Tio's dialogic education framework and brings in the relationships to the themes that we've identified. As I said earlier, Qui and Tio identified dialogic environment, dialogic moves and teaching goals, and you can see those across the top of our model. And then you can see the themes that we drew out aligned to Qui and Tio's different areas. And we also considered the structure of the lesson, the example code, the activity structure and students' own code that comes out of using PRIMM. But then we noted in our research that teachers report that students do not find it easy to explain how a program works or to use a range of linguistic tools to verbalise their reasoning. So we were able to develop a more general model that kind of drew out where we needed more research. So if you look on the right, you can see the generic model highlights areas where we feel more research is needed and more work with teachers. And these are highlighted as the dialogic environment and the dialogic moves. And in this, the PRIMM structure is removed because any programming lesson that facilitates dialogue could adopt this model.
So are we kind of nearly done now, or what's next?
Well, we think this is just open the door to a whole new area of research. Firstly, we or other researchers could evaluate this model, this generic model. So we could develop and evaluate some interventions that look at how we train teachers in dialogue moves and what impact that has on the way that children use dialogue and reason about their programs in the classroom. So that's all from us. Thank you very much for listening, and we're really looking forward to your questions.